Every fall, I'm reminded of a French engineer who was born in Paris and died in Paris. His name was Émile Clapeyron. And while you probably haven't heard anything about him today, or thought about him today, or likely ever thought about him, he's responsible for explaining something that happens to almost every vehicle in the fall. That little orange light on your dashboard, blinking at you, telling you that you have low tire pressure. You might assume that your tire has a leak. But what if I told you that even with a perfectly sealed, brand new tire, the pressure can still drop when the weather gets cold? And the reason has been sitting in chemistry textbooks, at least 20 of mine I have in my library, for nearly 200 years. It starts with one of the most famous equations in science. You were probably taught it, I was taught it, still getting taught it, just a little bit more complicated now. PV equals nRT, the ideal gas law. Before we get into what those letters mean, we need to go back to the people who figured out why gases behave the way they do. Robert Boyle discovered that when temperature stays constant, squeezing a gas into a smaller volume increases its pressure. Dr. Charles found that when pressure stays constant, heating a gas makes it expand. And Avogadro, which most of you know from the number, right, 6.022 times 10 to the 23, realized that under the same conditions, adding more gas means you need more volume. 3 different observations, empirical observations at that, 3 different scientists. And finally, in the 1830s, Émile Clapeyron used mathematics to combine these relationships into one single governing equation describing the behavior of gas. The equation we now write as EV equals nRT. Now, before somebody in the comments tells me that this equation isn't perfectly accurate, you're right. The ideal gas is an approximation, a really useful approximation, but an approximation nonetheless. It assumes that gas molecules take up essentially no space, they don't significantly attract or repel one another, and behave like perfectly elastic particles when they collide. That means that when a particle collides with a wall or another molecule, they don't lose any energy, right? It just goes same speed, back and forward. Real molecules obviously don't behave that way. But there's a great quote from a British statistician, George Box, that I think is perfect for this discussion. All models are wrong, but some are useful. And that's what we have here. We have a model of the states of a gas. It isn't perfect, but it is incredibly useful. So let's decode it a little bit. P is pressure, often in pascals. V is volume in meters squared. N is the amount of gas, how many particles are we talking about, usually moles. R is just a gas constant, and T is temperature in Kelvin. But there's something important about temperature we often forget because we're used to thinking about it in terms of weather, what's going on outside, how we feel outside. In chemistry, temperature isn't just how hot it feels. At the microscopic level, temperature tells us about the average kinetic energy of the particles in the system. In simpler terms, how fast those particles are moving. And that's the key to understanding your tire. Imagine the air inside this tire. It could be a bus tire, it could be a monster truck tire, it could be my Ford Edge tire out there. It's packed with billions upon billions of molecules flying around in every direction. They're constantly crashing into the inside walls of the tire. And every time one of those molecules collides with the wall, it transfers a tiny amount of force, momentum, to it. Billions of those collisions happening every second. That's pressure. The formula for pressure is just force over area. So it's pretty much just how many molecules are hitting that specified area in this amount of time. So now let's look back at our equation. PV equals nRT. Imagine you have the same tire, the same volume, the same amount of air, but the temperature outside drops. The air inside the tire, as a result, gets colder. the molecules move more slowly. They collide with the walls less energetically and overall produce less pressure. So the pressure in your tire drops and nothing had to leak out. I'm a tutor here at my university, and I like using the tire example to help students understand the ideal gas law. And oftentimes, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, think that tires just leak air in the winter, but that's not the case. Nothing had to leak out. That's the part that I think is cool. Your tire didn't lose air. There's, with a perfect tire, the same amount of air molecules inside the tire is the same from the summer to the winter. It lost pressure because the air lost kinetic energy, or temperature as we know it in everyday life. And there's one more little detail here that makes this even more interesting. When your car tells you that your tire is, let's just use my Ford Edge as an example, 35 psi. That number is gauge pressure. It's pressure relative to the atmosphere. The gas law works with absolute pressure, pascals, which includes atmospheric pressure. So the relationship isn't quite as simple as saying drop the temperature by 10% and your tire pressure drops by 10%. But the basic idea remains either way. Cold air means lower tire pressure. Which is why every fall you might walk out to your car, whether it's a Ford Bronco, a Ford Edge, or a Toyota Camry, one of my favorite cars, and you may see a little warning light start blinking back at you. And the solution isn't necessarily to patch up a leak or get new tires. As I'm sure most of you know, sometimes it's just filling it back up with more air molecules, because now you need more molecules to hit the same amount of pressure. And nearly 200 years ago, after Clapeyron put those ideas together, an equation that was just explained to you can explain something happening in your driveway every fall. And that's what learning is really about, right? Not memorizing equations, even though that does have some merit, and not balancing chemical reactions all the time, but looking at the ordinary things around us, the coffee in my mug every morning, the bread in my kitchen, the soap in my shower, the refrigerator in my kitchen, and realizing that everything underneath it, everything that makes it work, there's a little bit of chemistry happening there. Because chemistry isn't just something that happens in the laboratory. It's not something that happens in your OChem lab when you're a sophomore in college. It's happening right now, around you, and inside you. So next time the temperature drops and that little tire pressure light comes on, don't just think, I need to put air in my tire. Though you should. Do put air in your tire. Think about the billions of molecules inside it. Think about Clapeyron, and remember that you just watched and learned about an equation written almost 200 years ago that, though not perfectly, describes what's happening in your tire. If you want to see more chemistry stuff, subscribe to this YouTube channel. In the meantime, have fun, stay curious, and I will see you the next evening.